Not all Resident Evil games were created equally, and thus, not all Resident Evil remakes were or are to be created equally. The older games were all, for the most part, masterpieces that really only needed to be modernized, and so their remakes were mostly that, an update, an overhaul. They were brought into the present day with as little changes as possible to things like story and the characters. After all, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Of course, changes were made, mostly for the best, but not too many were needed, since when you have a masterpiece, it's difficult to make it even better. I am sure that this will remain the standard going forward for any old Resident Evil game that is remade, such as Code Veronica. However, again, not all Resident Evil games were created equally, which is why not all the Resident Evil remakes were or are to be created equally. While the older games only really needed the technical improvements and not so much quality improvements, the opposite is true for the more modern games, specifically Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. These two are recent enough and were sufficiently ahead of their times that they hold up incredibly well today. So they don't really need modernization that badly, at least for now. In terms of quality, however, they definitely need some help, since they are nowhere near as good as the games that came before them. That's not to say they are bad, of course, at least I don't think so. I think that they are both good games. It's just that they are far from the grandeur of their predecessors, since they are riddled with issues as far as story, characters, gameplay, tone, and structure goes. Therefore, when compared to, say, Resident Evils 2, 3, and 4, Resident Evils 5 and 6 are a lot more difficult to remake. Better graphics and controls simply won't cut it, and they cannot get by with just minimal changes. It's safe to say then that Capcom has their work cut out for them. Now, it goes without saying, of course, that they are very much up to the task, considering their track record thus far. They were somehow able to make Resident Evils 2 and 4, which were already basically perfect, arguably even better. And while the Resident Evil 3 remake was not as well received, I personally loved it. Plus, the original Resident Evil was definitely made significantly better with its remake. So the Resident Evils 5 and 6 remakes are in good hands. I believe in Capcom. I have faith that they can transform two games that are almost universally disliked, hated, or heavily criticized into beloved entries in an equally beloved franchise. As for how they can achieve this, well, there are honestly a bunch of changes that need to be made. There are so many, in fact, that I won't list them all in this video, since this video is about the fact that Resident Evils 5 and 6 are the most difficult ones to remake and why. An in-depth look at just what makes them such divisive games and how they can be fixed is honestly beyond the scope of this video. Though I could make a separate video or separate videos one for each game, in order to tackle said subject. For now, I just want to briefly go over some of the major problems I personally have with both games, which are also the problems most people have with them as well. So, first up, and this applies to both, they focus way too much on action and not enough on horror. Now, to be fair, Resident Evil 4 is to blame for tipping the scales in favor of more action and less horror. But it did not go too far. It still remembered that it's meant to be scary, and it was. However, Resident Evils 5 and 6, especially 6, leaned excessively towards action. And, as a result, they were not as tense or as scary as their predecessors. Which is not a good thing for a series that is supposed to be survival horror. Second, and this applies only to RE5, it borrows way too much from RE4, and I mean specifically creatures and gameplay. Now I get it, Resident Evil 4 was a landmark game and a breakout success. So it's understandable that they would want to take as much from it as possible for a sequel. Plus, for lore reasons, it's fitting that there are a lot of creatures in RE5 that are almost completely taken from RE4. However, Resident Evil 5 feels too much like Resident Evil 4 for its own good. It really would have been nice if it had diversified a lot more. Say what you want about Resident Evil 6, but at least it took a lot of swings. And while it missed a lot of them, it also landed several of them. It definitely is a more fresh and creative experience than Resident Evil 5, even if it is, arguably, not as good of a game. Third, and this applies only to Resident Evil 6, there are way too many QuickTime events. Now I understand that QTEs were still in their heyday back then, but still, RE6 relied on them way too much. It felt like pretty much everything you had to do, apart from shooting, from opening a door to fending off an enemy, required a QuickTime event, which made the game a royal pain to play sometimes. QTEs are nowhere near as popular nowadays, so I am sure that they won't plague Resident Evil 6 again, especially seeing as the original Resident Evil 4 had plenty of them during cutscenes, while its remake has none. Fourth, and this applies only to Resident Evil 6, multiple campaigns are both a blessing and a curse. Yes, having 4 separate campaigns and 7 main characters means that there was a lot of variety, for the most part. You could control different characters, each with their own personality and with their own story that was part of the bigger picture. They each had different unique skills and or weapons, plus you got to traverse through several different environments and face several different monsters. However, each campaign varied in terms of tone. Leon's was slower and scarier. Chris and Jake's were more action-packed and lighter on scares, and Ada's was heavy on puzzles. So you honestly got tonal whiplash when going from one to the other, and it felt almost like you were playing different games. Additionally, since the campaigns intertwined at several points, you sometimes ended up doing the same sequence more than once, just with a different character and perspective. The repetition felt like padding, and it was honestly not very fun. Also, while each campaign had its merits, they were not all equal in terms of quality. So sometimes it felt like you went from a good game to a bad one and vice versa, which contributes to the feeling of whiplash. Finally, and this applies to both but mostly to Resident Evil 5, partner AI definitely needed some work. Your companion was not the sharpest tool in the shed during gameplay, and the fact that they would use up your ammo reserves made them almost as much of a liability as an asset, much like Ashley was in the original RE4, since you had to use your healing supplies on her whenever she got hurt. This was of course remedied in the remake, so it's likely that RE5 will receive the same treatment. In RE6, partner AI was better, though still far from perfect, and they no longer used up your ammo, which is a great improvement. So there you have it. Now you know that Resident Evils 5 and 6 are the most difficult ones to remake from the main series, why this is the case, and briefly some of the biggest issues with them that have to be fixed in order to make their remakes great. Again, I could make a more in-depth video or pair of videos where I discuss in detail exactly how they can be improved and what changes need to be made to them. Like I said earlier, such a topic warrants a lot more discussion, which goes beyond the scope of this video. Though this is only part of the reason. I also need to replay both of them so that I can really break them down properly based on their flaws. It has been years since I last played them. Therefore, it's possible that they might be better or worse than I remember. Please let me know if you would like to see me make said video or videos on them, and please also share your thoughts on everything I discussed in this video. Also, please do drop a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more
Resident Evil.
Additionally, down in the description, I have affiliate links for GameStop, which is where I buy all my gaming related stuff, affiliate links for Amazon, which is where I buy all my stuff that is not gaming related or groceries, and a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page. These links will all allow you to support me directly if you would like to. I would very much appreciate it. Also, I have a link to my main channel where I cover Pokemon. If this is something that would interest you, then please check said channel out. Thank you so very much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.